Hello, everyone. This is Ivan joining from Bulgaria. Crispin, thank you once again for the very kind words. I always kind of love seeing you on screen as well. And welcome everyone to this November kind of full edition of Flex World. I'm very excited to join this conversation, and I'm especially excited to talk about how can we use technology to actually help us probably make more revenue. Maybe talk a little bit about some myths that we can bust with some of our attendees today and the panel that we have. And at the end of the day, make sure that we figure out ways in which you can actually make more money and revenue when you're implementing technology, and it's not just a cost center for you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to move forward and introduce our panel. So today we're going to have Daniela from Kisi, who is leading their tech partnerships and integrations, joining us. Then we have a very well-known name in the industry, Hector Colonos, who is the co-founder of Synchro, and Tom Proctor, the CEO of NCG. They're going to be joining me today so we can discuss a little bit more about the trends in technology and kind of try to help you with some practical advice based on our own experience and some success stories that we have seen in the industry. So welcome everyone. How are you doing today?
Hi, Evan. How you doing? All good.
Doing great, doing great. So do we have everyone online? Can you hear us well, guys? All good?
Gotcha.
Great. Okay. Well, let's kick it off. We have a very jam-packed agenda today. So let's start by going through the first question for the day. It's a very lengthy one, but basically we're trying to figure out, has the co-work industry really become complacent when it comes to technology solutions? Miro mentioned that there was this kind of a trend where everybody was building their own technology to be unique, but also at the same time there were so many threats that were lurking around in the last few years. So maybe some of the operators kind of left this behind, and it's just a question if there are any hidden threats that you guys see and that we have to kind of pull forward and expose to our audience today. So I'm going to be happy to hear your opinions. Who wants to jump in first?
Hector, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Um, so I mean, you hit it absolutely correct when you said there is a bit of complacency. There's been a few different things that have happened over the last couple of years. A very big trend that was the kind of monolithic tech stack has thankfully started falling apart. People started to realize that it's very, very critical, as Miro mentioned a little bit earlier, to really focus on the best-in-class solutions for every solution for every piece of the business, as opposed to just focusing on having one invoice from one supplier most of the times. Now we'll get into how that's differing in a little bit. But the fact that the monolithic tech stack is crumbling and we're getting best-in-class solutions is really, really good. The problem with that, though, is there's the other side of the coin, that you become comfortable with the fact that everything just works right now, instead of continuously looking at, is there better tech? Is there better solutions? Can our team be more optimized? Can our systems be more optimized? Can we improve our processes? And that's the kind of best case scenario, that you're missing optimization opportunities. But the worst case scenario is we're going into very volatile markets again. A couple of years ago, we saw an example, a pretty popular up and coming grassroots door access company, not in the call today, disappeared. And all of a sudden, no one could open doors. Now, in that situation, a lot of spaces hadn't prepared for that. So you've got to just keep a little bit of an eye on what's happening in your stack, but also what's happening around the ecosystem, so that you can be able to move into just securing your tech stack a little bit more, not from a security perspective, which I'm sure we'll dig into with the people on this panel, but just from a operations perspective.
That's a great point, Hector. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, go ahead.
No, look, I was just going to say that that disease of it works, why change it? It's not linked to just the co-working industry. It's so many industries, but this industry in particular, and as we move into a city, we move into a world where you just can't have 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 staff per building, costing all that money just to run a spreadsheet for this, a spreadsheet for that, three of them running the, whatever it takes to invoice the kitchen areas, etc. All of that can be done through technology now, and the technology is not even expensive. Um, I'm so sure there are companies out there that could bankrupt themselves by just purely hiring for all the positions that could so easily be fixed by £500-600 per month spent on a good software platform. But as long as that software platform is integrated properly into the back end finance systems, which is never really done, and particularly these, as you started with, Hector, these companies that have gone out and spent a lot of money building their own versions of Office R&D. They started with the shiny thing, and now they're at the point of wanting their shiny thing to speak to Microsoft Dynamics. Great, okay, good idea. But Microsoft Dynamics updates every, 10 days at best. So that means you've got to keep your dev team in-house forever. You've got to make sure that they stay on top of things forever. And then you want to integrate your finance platform into that mix as well. And you've got updates coming out every 10 days from them, and your dev team gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and your workload gets bigger and bigger, and it never ends. That cycle never ends. And the second you get off that cycle, you are left with a platform you can't run. You are at the complete whim of anyone that built it prior to the moment you decided to get off that treadmill. And then you start knocking on the door of Office R&D and Syncaroo and others. And you can find some significant savings when you do knock on that door. That's my 2 cents on that.
From our perspective, just before we move on to the next one, if that's okay, it's extremely simple. And I want to go back to Hector's point on the fact that it's not about being complacent, it's about being comfortable. I do see that there are two narratives. On the one hand, operators, they come to us and they're like, hey, unless you integrate with these 5 platforms, we can't really go with your system because we want everything in a fully operational way, which luckily we can do. But then on the other hand, you get companies that are scaling that or trying to scale and build it themselves. And what happens is that eventually you are not going to be able to have enough resources. You're not able to be put enough resources in maintenance towards those systems. And you can't scale, which is where the threats come in. So we see it from the physical security aspect as well, not just from the software. If your security system is not up to date, it's not modern, if you are not surrounded by experts that know how to do the updates and how to make sure that it is working properly, that's where you're going to fall short. And those are the threats, is that from the security perspective and from the scalability perspective, you're leaving money on the table, if not losing it. So it's not necessarily about complacency, it's about comfort and making sure that you're at a comfortable space where you see that the technologies that you use are giving you revenue, but not comfortable enough where you're not really putting resources towards making it better and making sure that, your cybersecurity is up to date, and also like all of the other systems that keep that space operational.
Yeah, that's a great point, and because you guys kind of representing the best of breed solutions that are out there, and like Hector with Syncaroo is kind of helping us get this whole thing together, working nicely. I was just wondering about another kind of, I think, philosophical question that is coming up in the industry right now, which is like, basically you have the option to choose like a main platform and integrate with best of breed solutions. Like you can use NCG, you can use KC or ISOFI with the NCG, whatever, but it's like a specific solution that only does this thing. You're the experts, and you can trust these companies to work on that problem. At the other end, it's like the whole idea that I can get everything from a single vendor, and that's the best path forward. Why do I have to deal with multiple vendors? It's such a hassle, and it's better that way. So do you see any threats in both options? I mean, do you see a threat or a problem with you going with one vendor, putting all your eggs in one basket, or some sort of problem with just doing the best of breed? What's your opinion on that one?
I mean, from our point of view, if you don't mind to start, guys, we approach the market with an open source, an open source ideal. Trying to put all your eggs in one basket. Firstly, it's almost impossible to do. No one does everything, right? No one does everything, and you also find that these companies, it's not. There is rarely a building built for just co-working, right, or just the Office R&D floor, the floor that Office R&D is going to work on. There is the entire rest of the technology stack for the rest of the building, and then more importantly for the company, for how the the business of the landlord itself actually functions. All of it needs to speak to that. Turning up and telling a company that that is billions and billions of dollars in revenue, change everything so you can get your co-working space to work is just not. It isn't realistic. It is not. It is not, as a business unit, going to get you anywhere inside that giant company, and it is certainly not going to win you any friends as you try and get yourself promoted on your career. And it is almost impossible to get right, and you are then stuck. You are stuck on a journey that you can't change. And you generally find as well, we find that those people in those closed environments, even though everything is meant to work seamlessly, they're the ones that spend the most on custom dev to try and get things to work, because they're having to interact with so many other systems that this closed platform has decided to not bother to integrate with, and therefore we just don't see long term how that closed world can work unless you're willing to spend the amount that Apple do on creating a beautiful iPhone and iOS environment that's completely seamless. But I'm afraid the building world just isn't. It isn't that simple. So yeah, there we go.
Well said, Tom. I think you actually also bring up a very valid point. What we're seeing across the industry with regards to landlords is the fact that operators who are able to plug into as many landlord stacks as possible are actually winning more management agreements and contracts because it's easier for them to integrate with the landlord. So you're going from a situation where if you had a monolithic system and you had to keep building those integrations, your partnership costs are now higher than if you just had a system that could, in some way, using a little bit of magic sauce and maybe a kangaroo-based logo, to connect to more systems, you would be able to win more contracts as data and data sharing becomes a bigger part of these agreements.
Look, from my perspective, it's just really dangerous to expect and put the pressure on one company to do absolutely everything. Nobody has infinite resources to make every single feature amazing. And the way I like to think about it is like as a restaurant, like when you go somewhere and they offer everything on the menu, like chicken, fish, beef, pork, like something's gonna fail. And there's no dish that you're just like, it's delicious. So that's why partnerships are so important, and that's why integrated systems are so important, because you're basically picking the best parts of both products and putting it together so that it can scale your business and you can use it in a way that works for you. We have in Kisi, 80 features and you use 20, and Office R&D has the same and you use 5 or 6 or 60. That's great. You're using what works for your business. So is it easier to just be able to shop from one person? Of course it is, but that also goes back to the danger of putting your business on the line with one company that you don't really have full visibility on what might happen or how they might do business. They may make you sign a contract for 5 years, 10 years, and you don't really know what's going on there. So I think it's always really important to understand that that's why integrations are so feasible for your business and so scalable, because you can pick what really works for you and know that you are choosing experts in that field for your business instead of putting the pressure on just, one company to deliver all the time.
Yeah, and it's also the best. This is the best way to start cheaply as well. And a lot of new operators they kick off. You can just pick one or two things, but if you from the open source world, you pick one or two things from a closed platform, you're then stuck forever choosing just their features. It's the best way to get going in a way that makes sense and puts you on the right path as well, which I know is so important for quite a lot of Office R&D customers who are starting off with one or two locations and then building. Like this open approach will not lock you in and not get you into trouble in years.
And
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sort of to go back to the other side of the coin, you did ask a very valid question. There is a risk of having too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Having too many platforms, having too many vendors. But we're also seeing a different executive being added to co-working businesses, and that's the CIO role, right? More and more people are bringing in experienced operators, whether it's on a fractional basis, whether it's partnering with a company like NCG or alternative, figuring out ways to bring in experts to help them manage this stack of vendors, as opposed to bringing that knowledge in-house. Just like you wouldn't, where we've stopped having to build everything in-house, bringing that insight in-house isn't necessarily something you have to do as you're at that 5 to 6 location. Once you get to 30, 40 locations, probably want to bring in a CIO who can oversee your tech stack. But as you're in that growth phase, there are people out there who can help you tame the unknowns, or make it easier for you to keep control over all these vendors and all their updates and what needs to be changed, and etc.
Yeah, you're all making very valid points. I think it's also just the sentence about, hey, who are you optimizing about? Like when you're buying from one vendor, I get it, it's very convenient. I think it was mentioned that it's very convenient to buy from one vendor, but are you optimizing for the buyer, like for yourself, or are you optimizing for the best experience of your customers? We were talking about NPS just before, how important it is for customers and all that. So I think at the end of the day, maybe the balance is somewhere in the middle. Like going like integrations all around is probably not the best path forward. It's very complicated and complex. You need the team behind it, like the CEO and everybody else. On the other hand, like all eggs in one basket, you're optimizing for your own satisfaction and simplicity, which might not be the best for your customers. So as we say at Officer R&D, just look at what the customers want and optimize for their happiness and satisfaction with your product, and then maybe the technology stack will follow accordingly. So you're going to find the best of breed solutions where it makes sense to invest for yourself. So I'm going to end that topic. We discussed it at length. So let's do a little bit of myth busting, guys. I think we can start with one that we discussed with Tom at the beginning, and also Daniela. I mean, we have been discussing the fact that everybody thinks it's the startup costs, especially when it comes to door access, to Wi-Fi and all that. It's like huge. And you guys were very like, no, it's not exactly like that. So what's your thought about this myth? Is it a myth actually in the industry?
Daniel, do you want to go first on that one, or do you want me to kick off? Or?
I can start, change it up a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions, or just generally topics, which is like the myths. Like, yeah, access control is so expensive, we just can't afford it. Or I already have a system in place. It comes from 3 tenants that were there and then they just left it. So we're good. We're just gonna move in and make it work. And yeah, that's fair. That works, you know, like we said in the first start of the panel, if it works, why change it? But it is not true that you have to stay with it just because you think that it's really difficult to change it or it is expensive. It is an investment, yes, and we are talking about, when we talk about security systems, at least for the most part, you also do have hardware involved, which is not the same as just, you know, paying and turning it on. You probably, of course, have to go through some installation process, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And especially today, you know, if you choose a system like Kisi, or just generally that is cloud-based and is integrated with your other tech stack, we can migrate from your existing hardware without having to rip and replace absolutely everything that was already installed. If you are a tenant in a building, this decision might come up to the landlord. That is also completely normal. And we have gone through deployments where we can talk to multiple stakeholders, multiple decision makers, and say, hey, this is just what's best for one business, even if you're using something different in your building. And we can also look into ways to make the same credential or the same access method compatible across the entire experience. So when you are a member coming in, or when you are a staff member coming in, you don't have to just use 5 credentials to get into the space. You can really just streamline that experience. And I think it's worth to revisit from our perspective. Sometimes people are like, well, it's security, but really it's not just security, it's the check-in experience. And that's how we like to think about it. It's your members are interacting with your space with the door. So, you know, there's nothing less hospitable than a door that you can't open. And that part to me is just really important. So if you think that it's too expensive, or that you can't change it, or that, you know, I don't want to deal with installation, we promise you that when you go to a company that is an expert in access control, those are things that we are actually dealing with. The headache is on us, so that you can focus on the member experience and also your security. So I would debunk that myth. If this was like a yes or no, this is totally a debunk that one.
Okay. Dom, you want to add?
Yeah, I think like that. Yeah, I do want to add. It leads on to me, for me, a point that people on their first or second locations always think that we'll just get started on this basic stuff. The spreadsheet, internet from the local guy, you know, the local whoever, And we'll upgrade it later as we start filling, we start filling the space, or we get our third site, or we get our investment, etc. But my kind of riposte to that is a lot of what Daniela said, but it's kind of no, you can't, you actually don't really have the luxury of doing that now. Okay, sometimes capital, even OpEx expenditure, whatever, just makes it impossible. But you don't really have the luxury of just sort of doing some basic things and then upgrading later. You are really locked into a journey. So instead of starting on a spreadsheet, just buy the most basic license there is for HubSpot. So start on that. Instead of spending buying the absolute cheapest Wi-Fi access point possible, get a survey done, find out what the absolute minimum of the best access points out there, and then at least get them refurb, right? So that at least they'll be at a decent price. So you're not locked into a journey on platforms that are gonna just cause you headache after headache after headache. And in the kind of modern world where we can OpEx, we don't need big CapEx, we don't need big CapEx charges, etc. We can put everything on OpEx contracts for you. Most companies can, us, Tech Within, all the Census, all these guys can. There isn't really an excuse for not doing so, for not thinking about the 2, 3, 4 year time frame. And I know everything on your first, second, third, fourth location is all about getting that location open, but it's just going to cause you so many headaches if you don't just think about the next 4 to 5 years when you're buying that first tech stack. And again, buy the basic Office R&D license, buy the basic Cisco license, whatever it is, just get the most basic version, but get it from the best suppliers at least. Is the minimum, is the absolute minimum, and then you'll realize the savings and time and effort and misery you don't have in 4 to 5 years compared to your competitors. It'll take a little while and it'll be painful at the first time, but just do it. Just take that little leap, and spend the time. And you might have to become a temporary expert yourself on how basic HubSpot works, but it's worth it, 100%.
Great.
Because it will save you hundreds of thousands of pounds to custom dev houses, which I know is something that me and Hector and Daniel talked about on the previous calls. So,
Hector,
Yeah,
you want
just
to
a little bit of effort at the start.
Yeah,
There's
thanks.
nothing more devastating than a 16 location co-working space that has not migrated to any kind of integration or automated check-in experience. And at that point, the mentality is, well, we've gotten so far without it, so might as well just continue. But then again, it all goes back to how much money are you losing because you don't have it. And if you had started earlier, again, it doesn't have to be with your first location, but what Tom just said, like have your 5-year plan and you're going to have to open more locations. You're growing in a certain direction. So understand that at a certain point, you're going to have to make a change. And it's going to be painful, probably at some point, if you don't do it from the very beginning, but it's better to do it earlier, understanding your business objectives than much later when you're just like, eh.
But it's back to your point again of you don't have to use all you can buy Kissy on day one. You don't have to use the 80 features. You can just use the one of it, right? And then at least you've got them for later. That's just, it's just a hammer away at that point for so long. It could have saved some of our customers and us, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Maybe that's not a good thing, but it is in the end. We want happy customers.
Okay, Hector, any short kind of advice on this one so we can kind of stay on time? Anything you want to share out there before we move to the next one, or?
Before we move to the next question, I mean, there is a myth that it was kind of foreshadowed in what both Tom and Daniela were saying. One of the biggest expenses for growing businesses, or the one that holds them back the most, is actually their technical debt. That not making decisions is making a decision. By not choosing something, you've made a decision not to choose something. So it does come down to a point where at some point you're gonna want to start connecting your systems up. And that's where we get like the biggest questions. And that's where a lot of folks come to us initially. And they're like, well, there's native integrations and there's custom development houses. That's the only way to integrate with things. And we're like, no, that's not the only way to integrate with things. There is this middle ground. And that is an area that we love digging into. And I know you just said a couple of minutes, so I'm definitely not going to go too deeply into this, but managed integrations are a hybrid between what exists as native, but going really, really deep to make them work for your business model and having a team to manage that for you that isn't on your payroll all day, every day.
Very valid point, and I can definitely have a testament to that. At Officer R&D, we had cases in which we kind of left things a little bit and shortcutted some things just to be very quick. And technical depth, it definitely bites you back. I can definitely say that. So yeah, I do fully wholeheartedly agree. Okay, moving to the next one. So we're talking about technology and we're talking about experiences at the co-working spaces. And I recently had this experience. I was in Boston and we were in a fairly big brand name co-working provider. And we were trying to find the space. Forget the fact that it was a little bit hard to find how to get into the building because it's part of a big building. But then actually getting into it and accessing it was I think more trouble than it should have been. So I guess, how do you approach using technology to provide a better experience for your co-working spaces? And I guess I'm going to leave the highlight to Daniela so she can kind of share a little bit more about Kisi over here as well and how you do it, guys.
Yeah, sorry to hear that you had a horrible experience, Ivan. That sucks. But yeah, I think that really goes to the point where you can't make it too hard for members or staff to get into buildings, because when it's too difficult, you just don't want to deal with whatever could be after. You just don't want to know what the rest of that experience is going to be. But also, if you make it too easy, that also makes members and staff think, well, this space isn't safe. This space doesn't feel exclusive. It doesn't feel like I'm paying for a membership because nobody's, making me feel like I belong here. So there's a really fine line that we always recommend co-working spaces they hit, which is just understand what you want your space to be and implement technology that allows you to move forward into that community line where it's like, hey, you matter here, you're paying. So we, of course, want you to feel exclusive and luxurious, but also it's not impossible to get in if you're just browsing or if it's just a day pass and you just want to understand what's going on in here. So I think we're going to talk about this soon, but one of my personal favorite stories and success stories with Kisi and Office R&D is with Gather, which is a very large co-working space in the US. And they specifically were looking for a solution that could scale with their business, that was reliable. There is, that's the slide, that could really support all of their members. So they have 7 locations. In total, we have 55 doors secured. I believe as of the time of the story, this might have grown since then. There were 2,500 members using the space, staff included. So that's a lot of different people that were also on 3 different membership types, which means that you can switch from locations across the US. You can, choose your home location and continue going to that one. And so for Gather and for James, having a technology and generally a system that was able to scale with them and that was able to give them that flexibility of, okay, if Daniela is coming in to my Virginia location Monday, but then she's going to be in Miami for the weekend and she wants to work from there, that's a possibility. So all of those things are experience that is for the member experience, and it goes beyond just a security system. So yeah, those are just some of the winning sort of highlights that we got from there, and I highly recommend that you check that story just because it really highlights also which features from Kisi they're using that were important for them. Mobile credentials is one of them. We talked about this, just making sure that experience of not losing your fob or like, where's my badge, where are my keys, it's on your phone. It's also safer because how often are you gonna let someone else use your phone or perhaps leave it at home? So that experience, again, it's closer to the user and it's also reliable, like Hector mentioned, you don't want to go with a company that is going to go bankrupt or like suddenly like the doors are not opening. So yeah, it is important that when you have 2,500 people entering your space, you for sure can offer something that is not going to break. That to me is really important. And going to the, it's difficult and there's nothing more hospitable than less hospitable than not being able to open a door. Access control is also a selling point. So it becomes something like that check-in experience becomes something that your members are going to start requesting. It becomes an industry standard so that if they have been at another co-working space where the check-in experience is amazing and then they think yours is great, but then they arrive and then they can't open the door, that's going to hurt the perception and their commitment to your membership types and your membership models. So the recommendation is always prioritize what that feels like from the moment they book a meeting room or the moment they buy their membership using Office R&D to when they open the door. That matters, and that is what they will remember at the end of the day. So just make sure that it's at the highest standards and it's good for your business, but it is also a selling point at the end of the day for more people to come to your space.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I've also had a different experience than the one that I started with, and it had entirely to do with door access. I was a visitor at another place, and I was pre-registered by the host there. I received my pass. I could open the door on my phone because they had mobile passes, which is also available through Kisi and Office R&D. And just the whole perception of the space, that they're like, oh, they're forward-looking. They care about my experience. I don't have to deal with 5 people and wondering what I actually have to do to get into the space. And I immediately get to my meeting. I'm not going to be late. This changes the perception of the space. So small things, like we're talking about door access and we're always thinking about security, but actually changes the perception about the experience. And in these days, experience, these small things do actually differentiate you, especially in very saturated markets. So yeah, very, very good kind of case study on this one. Okay. Moving to the next one, we're going to talk a little bit more about money, about revenue, not only about how much implementing technology costs. So we had this discussion with the panel, and we were like, okay, I mean, how can you use technology so you can create new revenue streams, maybe increase profitability? There were several opinions over here. I think Tom had the strongest one, and they had kind of a successful case study over here for us. So Tom, do you want to kick it off, and maybe we can let the others also join in on the party?
Yeah, look, we were talking about our Serendipity Labs deployments, and specifically one down in Bristol. We where we came into our own in this particular project is that we don't just we aren't just here to install the Wi-Fi or put the connectivity in. We have to really represent the customer. In this case, this customer coming over from the US, completely unfamiliar with the way things worked in the UK, procure everything from them, everything for them, from the software that was going in to the access control, set it all up, build it, integrate it all, get all the different platforms working together, get the road dug up to get resilient connectivity in, and then from that day zero, once it's done, get people moved in, get them set up on their individual networks so that Serendipity Labs can charge for additional services on top of it, things like that. It is all predicated on us being able to project manage end to end the software platforms that Serendipity Labs have their own called Oasis, right through down to the connectivity platforms that we end up installing, and that's sort of where we come into our own, as I've said, and that the integration piece was built onto the Office R&D platform that Serendipity already have, and we provided those sort of UK boots on the ground for them. So there was this kind of knowledge transfer that needed to happen. There's all this training that needs to happen, and now we're upgrading that site as well to include a platform called Isify, which I would encourage everyone on this call to go and have a look at, which is a network automation platform that will allow absolutely zero touch provisioning of networks. So we would never need to touch Wi-Fi networks again. We never need to touch data ports ever again. And that would automatically, charge for additional bandwidth usage, all this really, really cool pay-as-you-go stuff, really true pay-as-you-go. And, that system will even allow, we're moving away from day passes to hour passes to minute passes for meeting rooms, things like this, based on Wi-Fi usage. That is where we've got to already on the automation front. Now, in the background, all of those things are powered by Serendipity Labs' own platform, right? But Serendipity Labs have made their own platform. They've got 45 something locations and can afford to have their own devs and their own abilities in-house are substantial, led by Vinay, who's quoted there. That's not available to everyone. That's not even available probably to 95% of operators. And that is where our friends at Syncaroo come in to make it a reality. There's definitely no way that an environment like Bristol could drive so much additional revenue from the shops on site, from the food and beverage provision, from the printing, all of that stuff, without the Serendipity Labs machine behind it, which Office R&D plays a big part of, but is far from the whole thing. Unless a company, and again, if you're a small business, unless you're a company, you've got to go to Hector here to get that to work. So I'll pass it on to you.
Hector, any opinions? I guess Tom kind of shared this whole story. By the way, an important thing is you mentioned Isofy, so the good news is that we also now integrate with them. We have established our partnership, so you can really leverage that technology partnership with them as well. Hector, do you want to add anything around how we can basically create new revenue streams, increase profitability using technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, thanks for the nod. Always lovely working with you guys. So the main question is really about how we're seeing this huge shift in the revenue stack of co-working spaces. Yes, it's the experience. It's about being able to experiment with new product types, like Miro mentioned a bit earlier. Fractional offices is something we dug into a lot earlier this year. Being able to offer upsold Wi-Fi and make it easy. But there's also these additional services, notary services, professional services, mail management, all these additional pieces that you can add to memberships that increase the spend per organization or spend per customer without them taking more space. And that is where we're seeing huge growth in a lot of operators as they start to figure out that, yeah, we're in the physical space business, but we're actually in the business supporting business. And the more you start building your stack and your processes around that, the more profitable your space will become if you make the right precautions and you take the right decisions. And I think that leads us into one of the last talking points I really wanted to kind of dig into. But I'll let Ivan, if you want to take us to the next.
I think that's a good segue to the fact that we were discussing that when we talk about the revenue. Not all revenue is created equal, and you had a very good point on how technology can make this kind of differentiation and make your revenue streams more profitable. So let's segue into that, Hector.
Great. So it all comes down to the fact that for a long time, we've always thought about our revenue or the cost of revenue as fixed. You pay for a service, Kizzy, you pay for a booking aggregator, you pay for a commission, you pay for a mail management system. That was the cost of servicing the customer. But what we've actually learned over the last kind of 10-ish years of co-working is there's this, what we call bundled overheads. How much time does it take your team to service each unit of revenue? So every mail, every parcel you scan is a fraction of the total revenue of mail management. Every door access that doesn't work, or someone can't get in and someone has to go and figure out why their door access. Someone books assist books, gets to the front desk, nobody knows what this platform is that they booked on, no one can find them. End of the month, doing reporting, having to log into 60 different platforms to export reports. And this is all overheads that take away revenue, take away profitability of that revenue. And for a long time, it's kind of just been like left in the corner, festering and getting really, really angry. And now it's like, hey guys, that booking you made is actually losing you money. That lead you showed is losing you money. That mail you scanned is losing you money. And it's like, why are our spaces not growing on a profitability stand? And it's because we're not looking at all of the actual hidden and bundled costs of servicing that. And that's a lot of the work that we do at Syncaroo. I can give a few examples of how we've kind of come in to help operators streamline that, really focused on three main areas. One Tom mentioned, which is definitely Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi provisioning. Till now, most companies had to create an IT ticket. They had to have someone in IT go and create an account, set a port, do all these steps just so someone can pay you an extra $10 a month for additional Wi-Fi. The fact that it's now integrated both through native integrations and through Syncaroo, so that you can do things like that in the census, for example, it's making that Wi-Fi revenue or that IT revenue more profitable because you're doing less manual steps for every unit of Wi-Fi sold. The same with iWorkspace Mail. Their integration through us is the same. No one has to go and create accounts in iWorkspace Mail. No one has to go and take the billing from iWorkspace Mail and add it to Office R&D accounts. It's all just kind of kept in sync. So once again, every unit of mail is more profitable. You're just scanning and getting on with the day. And then obviously third-party aggregators, there's a slew of platforms out there. Some of them that we all know, some of them are getting native integrations, as we heard. Some of them will never build native integrations. Some of them are complacent with using Google Calendars for the rest of their lives. And that's fine. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about that. But there is this new breed of aggregators that's coming out that do not have interfaces, and they are going to need superb support. And they're going to need Kissy to open the door, whether they book as a first-time customer. They're going to need Wi-Fi to be provisioned, whether it's on Isify or a Census. If they have a virtual mail, they want their virtual mailbox set up instantaneously. And this is all going to happen at the speed of light, because we're now expecting the AI interfaces that we work with to provision things automatically. And as that becomes more and more expected, either you're going to have to hire, as Tom mentioned a bit earlier, a whole bunch of people to do a whole bunch of toggle swapping or tab toggling, or you're going to have to automate those pieces so that each piece of revenue you get is more profitable.
So Hector, just to follow up on that one, it's a very good point to discuss that profitability when you look at different revenue streams is important. Have you actually done this exercise? Like, have you like, how do you, if you're an operator right now and you're listening to this and like, oh, okay, I haven't thought about this. Like, what are my different revenue streams? What is my actually cost to, let's say, support that revenue stream? How do you start approaching this? How do you evaluate technology on that aspect? Is this something you usually do with your customers, or can people actually do it on their own? Where do they start from? Because I'm not sure that everybody's actually doing it when they start.
Great question. I think there may be some folks in here who haven't heard me get on my soapbox before. So in case you are hearing about our company for the first time, what we do at Syncaroo is help flex-based businesses get their best people unblocked. That's everything that we do. And we do that by connecting systems, aggregating data, automating tedious tasks, and providing managed integrations. But what that really comes down to is providing tech, but also guidance on how do you actually make these decisions to make your, what we call an operating stack, more efficient. I think we're going to be shifting increasingly to a world where technology was picked to do specific tasks for people, whereas now we're going to design processes and put technology behind that to enable new and more efficient operating stacks. So yes, to answer the question, we definitely help operators with that. We do kind of advantage audits and have an assessment, but you can do this at home. You do not need to pay Syncaroo for it. You don't need to pay anyone. Just start looking at where your team are spending their time in as granular format as you can. Are they spending 30 minutes on Facebook? Track that. If they're swapping between tabs, track that. We also found that there's another very hidden cost, and this is what we call the toggle tax. This is this idea that if you go to, everyone listening now, open up your Google Chrome and look at how many tabs you have open. I guarantee that almost all of you, like me, probably have at least 20 tabs open right now. What you probably don't know is every time you switch those tabs, your brain takes a second to assess what it's looking at. And it's like, okay, I need to find that field to update that data to get, so all of those small pauses actually break your productivity. So if you can get that granular and ask your team or track your team's usage of those tabs, you'll start seeing that hundreds of hours a year are lost in those micro pauses across your team. And that's how granular you can get. So I don't say that to scare that. There's a calculator on our website at syncaroo.com/toggle tax that will give you that calculator, but you can also dig into just looking at your team and just asking them, what did you spend today on? Which apps were you in? How often did you swap? And then tracking that down to how much you're paying them per year, how much you're then paying them per hour, and then figuring out what the hidden costs of all these services actually are.
And
I just want to add a really quick note there, Hector. I think once you do that exercise of really understanding where you're spending your money, where are your costs, you also understand that on the one hand, you might be losing money with your team and their productivity, like where are they're spending time on. But then on the other hand, you might also be losing revenue because your members are maybe not having the best experience, or maybe you're not offering enough membership models. Like maybe your space is not being utilized properly. Maybe you have 5 phone booths, but you're not charging for them. Or maybe you have one large open open area, but nobody's using it. So once you start understanding that that exercise helps you both understand how your team is utilizing their time and losing you money, you also understand how you can better implement customer feedback and member feedback to also grow your revenue. So it's two sides of your business that get scaled just by doing that.
Yeah, I agree fully. I imagine we're quite annoying to deal with because people come to us for Wi-Fi quite a lot of the time. We end up immediately talking about business processes and sales processes and systems and CRMs and refuse to speak to them about anything on site until they've sorted all of that out. So yeah, I agree with what you've been saying, Hector and Daniela. It's important to look at the rest of the business rather than just what's going on that location.
And I also think that because we're talking about profit, everybody automatically jumps to like dollar value or money when you talk about cost, but there is an opportunity cost as well. I think you both touched base on that throughout this conversation. The opportunity cost of somebody dealing with your mail manually, or somebody trying to, I don't know, fix some stuff or doing Excel sheets left and right. This is time that your people are probably not spending with your actual members that a machine cannot do, a technology still cannot do. AI is not that far. We'll see how Elon Musk does with his robots, but that's another topic. So there's an opportunity cost in this one. And I guess I just wanted to wrap it up with one last question. You are all very experienced. You're always talking with operators. And we're talking over here about efficiency, basically, because profitability is more or less connected to this whole concept of efficiency. You probably have some war stories and experiences. What's a story that you remember, or some case where you remember like people were very blind or it was like a very hidden cost that they were incurring by having some sort of an outdated process or technology that they were using, and they just couldn't see it before, and you kind of opened their eyes to it or just noticed it. What do you have such stories that you can share so people can kind of look for these signs that they might have inefficiencies in their tech stack?
I don't want to get in trouble with a particular customer. So I won't say their name, but
we can skip names.
Come to us, having come to us, like I said before, just for some Wi-Fi, we ended up reviewing their sales CRM and sales process, like I said, and found about 16,000 different products. Now this company
16,000.
Yeah,
16,
yeah.
16.
Different, yeah, 16,000 different ways of selling desks and meeting rooms, built up over 20 something years. I will never reveal the name, pain of death. But they then ask us to integrate that into a platform, just who we're talking about here today. There's no way that that's happening. There's no way that's happening without changing that entire back end. So that's my like the main horror story that I've got that I can only repeat in private, but I have with the full detail, that is. But yeah, that's the most dramatic example I've ever seen.
Okay. Hector, Daniela, you want to reveal something on that topic, or you prefer to?
Yeah. Well, my story is not as dramatic, but a common problem that we see sometimes is that customers may already be using a platform like Office R&D and may already be using Casey, but they don't have the integration enabled. And it's, the reasons vary. Sometimes it's just fear. Sometimes it's just, well, we don't really need it. Or sometimes it's just like, we prefer to keep it like this way. And that's just a really, really, really easy way to streamline operations if you're already paying for both platforms anyways. It's like a horror story, but it's definitely one that we hear often where it's just not enabled and it should be. So that would be my contribution.
And Ivan, I'll jump in with the other side of your question. What are the red flags that operators should be looking for? If you find yourself seeing a new opportunity and always answering yes, but, that's a problem, right? We want to do fractional offices, yes, but our tech doesn't allow us to do that. Or yes, but it will be too expensive. We want to upsell Wi-Fi, yes, but it will take too many tickets. We want to implement a door access system, yes, but. If you see that yes, but coming up again and again and again when you're talking about technology, that's a time to take a step back, reassess. Are you designing your processes around tech, or are you designing your tech around processes? One of those is right, one of those is wrong. I'll leave that with you.
Before we move on, my team are currently comparing how many tabs they've got open One of, I won't name her name, but she says she has 3 or 4 separate browser windows open with about 100 tabs on each. So there you go.
Yeah,
You're not wrong.
yeah. It's a pure miracle her computer still works. But yeah, interesting.
I'll have some words with her.
Okay, well, we have last 10 minutes, and I'm gonna give some time for people to think about questions. And I think, yeah, like guys, if you wanna type any questions in the box, just let us know. We're gonna leave around 5 to 10 minutes at the end. I'm gonna ask you one short last question because we have the time, guys. So we were talking about kind of the typical tech stack starter pack that you need to kind of have, which system you should look at. So from your experience, what are kind of the 2-3 categories of systems everybody kind of has to have when they start their space or they move forward? And if you feel like it, you might share kind of the typical systems you usually recommend in that case, because I think that's going to be very practical for people that are just starting or maybe trying to take your advice and be like, oh, okay, we started Excel, maybe it's time to graduate from that. So just a short suggestion while people come up with any questions, and then we can go to answering those.
Tom,
Do you want to go, Hector? Look, if you want to keep it really simple, you go for HubSpot. You take Zero. You get Office R&D. You don't scrimp on the connectivity and the connectivity provision and the stability of it. Stability far more important than speed, by the way. If you've got choice between the two, you take the stability every time, and then just stick with one of the major brands for the networking equipment, and they're going to stay around for a long time, and they'll keep up to date. They'll keep the systems up to date, and they'll keep them interoperable, and you'll be in a half decent place. So you can't go wrong with HubSpot, Zero, Office R&D. If you've got something a little bit, a little bit more legacy in there, then go speak to Hector, and he'll make it work for you. It's not rocket science. Just start with the big names, and you'll be all right. That's the recommendation, really.
And I'd take that a little bit further. We always tell people to think of their space or their stack as an onion, right? In the middle, the most important part is your hospitality services. What is the technology that allows you to service your paying customers? That's your Office R&D. It's how you speak to your members, whether it's email, Slack. Figure out how you're going to communicate once people are paying you. And then on the flip side, figure out what the next layer is. So then outside the hospitality layer, you then have what we call the sales layer, and that's your HubSpot, your CRM. How are you converting someone who's heard about you into a paying customer? And then outside of that, your lead gen. How do you bring in? So you got to kind of think a little bit of like what the most important things are, and that is your hospitality layer. Hospitality layer is your most important option, and then you're going to add out as you go from there. But Tom made a pretty standard stack, a pretty good tech stack there to start with. I just do want to hit one more point home. I know we're running out of time, and I know Daniel can add some more here, but definitely find, when you're making these decisions, find people who know and understand flex space businesses. Do not go to, and I'm saying this and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, who provide IT services and consulting and dev services, but if they've never been in a flex space, flat out, they probably shouldn't be building solutions or recommending solutions for your flex space business. I'm not saying you have to come to us. I'm not saying go to Tom, but there is a wide array of people in the world who've done flex before. Speak to other operators, attend the free events that are online, attend events like this, connect with other operators, attend the Juicies and GWAs of the world, and make sure that you are asking them for recommendations before you go to the local dev or your cousin's nephew's aunt's dog walker and asking them to build you a tech stack. That's the last thing I want to say, and then I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah. Daniela, you want to add anything, or should we switch to the others?
Just, yeah, real quick. I mean, the simple answer, obviously, like Tom said, like think CRM, think access, think network. think bookings, of course, but you know your business better than anyone else. So my recommendation is to ask yourself the hows and the whys and the what questions first to really understand what areas of your business you want to optimize, what areas of your business you think you need better technology to scale them and to support them. And then from there, start looking at the vendors that you think can support that. And one analogy that we use throughout the panel too is just you're probably not going to use all of the features from all of the platforms that you choose. And that's completely fine. You know, it's just like your iPhone or your laptop, you're using very little of it, you know, maybe 3 features out of it, but the operations behind it is what you like about it because that's the experience. So think about your co-working space like that, you know, what's powering it and what is my member seeing and how are they associating themselves to this space. So just, you know, take some time to really be reflective. Like Hector said, go to people that know, that have been to spaces, that can recommend things for you and help you through that journey. But at the end of the day, you're the expert, and the best thing you can do is collect all of that data and that feedback so that you can implement what works for you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate our time together. And Tom, Daniela, Hector, I appreciate it very much for joining in. A lot of practical advice for everyone. I think it was a kind of good discussion with some specific recommendations. So it was hopefully useful. I know we have a few questions from the audience. So I guess now is the time to go over them. So guys, can you share the first question?
Hey, Ivan.
Hey, Crispin. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Ivan. It's always good to see you. Tom, Daniela, Hector, always good to see you guys. And thank you for the contribution to Flex World Series today. It's a particularly personal one. Tom, I'm going to top trump you. Sorry, mate. Sorry, I've got to top trump you. I will say that I was involved with a space that had 30,000 iterations of meeting room members. It had acquired quite a few businesses, so I'll give them that.
Okay, well, I'll give you that one.
Sorry, and let's not say that we're proud about that. That's not cool.
No, it's an absolute disaster.
I think it's a mega exciting time, and again, to personalize it, having come from the hardware market, hardware integration market, Tom, I feel your pain every day. I know how painful it is. I'm really excited about the convergence between hardware and software, and the fact that that develops into tangible efficiencies for spaces and operators. I think it's really a cool time to be alive. It's definitely a cool time to be alive at Office R&D, as we're in the middle of it, as you've all correctly said, with the glue that sits in the middle of it. I've got a couple of questions that have come in. You said you need to assess your tech, but most of the people sitting here in the audience have a space to run, right? And we're in the middle of tech. We're always obsessed with our stack. Aren't we important? Sorry, I'm not trying to trivialize our jobs, but ultimately, yes, we're important to us. But there are operators that have much bigger issues than just a tech stack. So can you identify, and I think this probably falls to Hector, the best time? When do you need, and is there a good ideal time to do that assessment?
I think you're absolutely right, there's the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, right? The best time after that is today. So it's one of those things where the more you accrue tech debt, the harder it is to get out of it. But there are a lot of other priorities, and that's why there are services and solutions out there that bring in experts to do the hard questions, to ask the questions, to dig into the stack. But I do want to just highlight re-highlight a point. It's not just about the tech. It's about the team and their processes. You have to think about what your team is doing, what you hired them to do, and what actually makes you money. Highlight those 3 things the next time you're having your morning coffee, and then just put them on your desk. And then as you work day to day, look around your space and see which bucket is what your team doing, which bucket does it fall into. That's an easy way just to kind of start thinking about it. I'm not saying you need to sit down and do a 6-month analog analysis of all your data, all your cabling, all your Cat5s, all of that stuff. Just start with what matters today And as I said, planting a seed today is better than planting a seed 6 months from now.
I think that's fair. I think that also goes hand in hand with that NPS question that was asked earlier on, right? Is that when you see that dip starting to happen, I think that's, I know it's not the only thing that you need to assess in NPS, but it's certainly part of that, right? Is that you may have come to a natural position of that assessment. Sorry, please.
I just want to quickly jump in here. You did mention something that's really important, and it's about us as tech providers thinking our tech is the most important. The best tech in our industry is completely invisible. It's tech that just works, and the member doesn't know how it works, and they don't care. All they want to do is use the space to run their business or to do whatever they're doing. That is the best stack you could possibly aim for. And Office R&D and folks in this room are pioneers in nailing that early on.
That's
Yeah. We know things are going wrong when people are noticing the technology. It's as simple as that. Right? Simple as that.
Like, brilliant. Tom, this is for you. It's a fairly challenging one, so apologies. Some of these spaces are built at fit-out stage, and the fit-out world, by its nature, owns the building during that fit-out phase.
Yeah.
Sometimes during that procurement cycle of fitting out a building, the main contractor has different ideas, whether they're agendas or ideas. They have different ideas on what's going to be implemented. And the way that fit out is implemented is normally in stages. And sorry, I'm not trying to be condescending in any way when I'm saying that, but ultimately there are packages within the fit out process.
Yeah.
And those are provided by various service providers. How do we break down the silos that exist within those packages to make sure this utopian ecosystem is developed and delivered to the point that the client is the operator, not the fit out contractor, because the client has to occupy post fit out? So how do you break those down and make sure that
you've got to start by talking the language of the Sparkies, as we would call the electricians, as the construction companies. You've got to talk their language, and you've got to break things down yourself. You can either do it yourself, or you can come to an NTG type business to do it for you, right? It's simple as that. Way before we even get to talking about a software or an Office R&D or a HubSpot or whatever that is, and companies like ours are planning the routes for the cables to go down. We're saying we need 16 amp commando sockets in X. We are saying this needs to be looking like this, but we'll break our recommendations down into those packages and into those stages. But with the fact that we know that we're pretty much the only people that care what happens on day one, other than the client themselves, and the operators are going to pick up that site. We keep that in mind through every single stage, but you've just got to have people on board that understand. At NCG, we've got as many people that can understand, the makeup of a building and power as we have network engineers, right? And we have a chief digital officer that understands nothing but software, and those people have to communicate seamlessly with each other to make sure we manage and project manage those 15 different parties to make sure on day one the operator can walk in, the space works, and you can actually plug in an Office R&D and it will work. Those sites, you said it's a challenging question, but those projects and those sites are a dream for us. They're far easier than walking into a WeWork and having 48 hours on a weekend to flip it from one operator to another. It far more difficult to do than spending 18 months with 15 different contractors building and slowly iterating a package to completion. Give me that any day over 48 hours to get something working and live onto Office R&D, and then brand new Wi-Fi for everyone, and set up, and then have it seamlessly. People walk in then on the Monday morning when we kick them out on a Friday at 5 p.m. That's a tough job. That one's difficult. The fresh build is a beautiful thing. and very rare, very, very rare.
Rare thing, and I think that we can go probably into the depths of retrofitting, etc. You did touch on it during the session.
Yeah,
I suppose it also ties into the fact that the statement that Hector made was around choosing the right technology implementation partner on the basis that they know what Flex is all about, and has that agenda at the forefront of their mind. So thank you again, everybody, for the session. I find this a really exciting one, and so I really appreciate the time that you've taken to be with us today. So thank you very much, Daniela, Tom and Hector, for the time that you've taken, and of course to Ivan for moderating here. So thank you very much indeed, all of you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
thanks, Ivan. Thanks.
Thank
Crispin.
you. Thank you all.
Good luck for
Appreciate
the
it.
rest of the day, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.